Hi, welcome to the BA Brew. I'm Jonathan.
I'm Debbie.
And I'm Pete.
Today we're going to talk about data and why we love or why we don't love data. So it's going to be an interesting one. And I thought we'd start with a question for you, Pete. Why does data draw you in? What's the fascination?
Oh, that's a very good question. Where does one start? I don't know. I think there's something quite satisfying about data. It's something that you can kind of really you can define very clearly. You can get to the bottom of things. Data. I mean, a lot of my career has been in information systems development, and data is the foundation of any kind of information system. Without data, systems, solutions, software, call it what you will, wouldn't actually be able to function. And you can find it in virtually everything that happens in the world nowadays. There's data somewhere at the heart of it.
So, Debbie, what about yourself? What is it that's fascinating you about this particular subject?
I think it's logical.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can get insights from it. I think you can look at it from lots of different angles so that you can understand things better. I mean, I can just while away a lot of hours playing about with data because I am trying out different, percentages, different ways of looking at something. It's just got so much to offer. And it's fascinating because it tells us about the world, doesn't it? About what's going on and about what people think and how they live. And it's just fascinating. And like Pete, I've worked in information systems a long time, but I like data in all sorts of different aspects. So taking information, really to its sort of broadest extent, but it just tells us so much. And there are so many different ways to look at it. That's why I think I like it.
Could we, just for the audience, and either of you, define the difference between data and information? Who would be comfortable with that one?
I'm quite happy to pick that one up.
Okay.
It's a common thing that comes up, and then maybe Debbie can correct me afterwards, but it is a common thing that comes up, isn't it? What's the difference between data and information? And I mean, on one of our data courses, one of our many data courses, we have exactly this conundrum, and we present a number, and it's something like 2222222.
Mm-hmm.
And we say, what is this? It's a big number. It's 22,222,000, whatever. But it doesn't have any meaning in that sense. It's important as long as you put some context around it. And then when we reveal the answer, what it is the 22nd of, God, I've lost it now. Sorry, no, the 22nd of the 2nd, 2022 at 10:22 p.m. So in other words, it's a date and time stamp, effectively.
Without that your phone number, Pete.
Well, it could help me as well. Don't try and ring it, by the way, just in case. But that context makes it information. It's now in useful information. It informs someone possibly to make a decision or to do something with that information. That's my take, anyway.
No, I agree with you, Pete. I always think of data being raw digits, put context, and you get information. And I also think if you then have other data in context that you can use to compare with that, then you have insights. So, if somebody says, I don't know, 1.2 is a digit, a figure, and then you have a context around that maybe it's a financial ratio for, I don't know, liquidity or something like that. And then you get what last year's liquidity was or what a competitor's liquidity is, then you have insight. So that's how I always like to think of it.
I was going to throw a different question out there then, just in case it's coming up in people's heads. What's metadata then? Because that's the term that people hear. What's metadata?
Well, how long have you got?
We've only got
These are going to be quite quick sessions, but I mean, again, I'm happy to pick that up, unless Debbie wants to take that one. Well, I think quite simply, the word meta is used in lots of different contexts, and it's something that defines itself in a sense. So metadata is data that defines data. There are lots of different types of metadata, I have to say, and I've been running data literacy courses where a particular client of ours uses it in a very different context to the way that we teach it on some of our data analysis courses. So you get things like content metadata, and a classic example of that would be if you consider, say, in the modern world, a movie as a piece of data, then metadata about that movie could be things like, the date, the date it was published, the director, the cast, the genre, all of those things. It's data that describes that movie as a piece of data. But I think in terms of business systems and information systems, we often talk about it as pieces of data that define the data items that are necessary to support the business, and we often talk about information as part of the POPIT model. Quick plug there for the POPIT model. Information is at the heart of business systems. So, someone has to define what exactly that information should be, and how is it structured? How big is a custom number? Does it have a particular format? Does it have any validity in terms of ranges? it must be within certain ranges to be valid. All of those things that define that are the metadata. So it wasn't a particularly quick answer, but
it's a good answer though. So I'm going to share an alternative perspective then, and this is the point at which you might be ganging up on me, I don't know. So I like data in terms of I like what it can do, and I like the insight it can provide. I can't get excited about it. I can't say, yes, I'd like to get an Excel spreadsheet out and compare different ratios and possibilities, probabilities. And it's just, I see it as a means to an end. And I don't know, I'm much more excited about a process view, or trying to understand how do the different dimensions of POPIT fit together in the overall business system, and what outcomes we're achieving. And some of the outcomes you can't as easily measure using data. How does the product or the service make someone feel? And you could try and measure it, absolutely, but I think it's it's difficult to really put a number on. I'm this angry. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm at 10. You can put a number on it, but it doesn't kind of really capture that feeling for me. It's kind of, I don't know, it's a means to an end for me, and I just can't get excited about data. So I've got a mental block on it, possibly. Maybe you guys can help me remove this mental block. This is where you can gang up on me, maybe. I hope not. But
the thing that occurred to me there is you were talking about this, and then you said, but you can't measure it. So, the idea of data is if you don't have data, you can't measure it. And it's as simple as that, I guess, isn't it? But if you've got the right mindset and you look for the right things, you can pretty much measure anything. Now, I don't know whether Debbie would like to pick up on this a little bit. Maybe I'm speaking a little out of turn here, but that's my view.
No, I agree, Pete, actually. Whether the measure is valid and whether it actually gives you all of the insight that you need is questionable, but you can usually measure some things, and then you have to make a judgment around it. But that, to me, is where people really start to understand data. So, Pete and I sometimes talk about looking at data and looking how it's presented on things like review sites. Yeah. So something like, TripAdvisor or something like that. And then looking at, well, where's that data come from? And what does that data mean? And you can measure people's opinions by asking them to give a score. Okay. And so you get quantitative data that is a score that then will tell you that this particular hotel is rated, 3 out of 5. But then you have to say, okay, well, let's dig a bit further. How many ratings are there? If there's one and it's 3 out of 5, then actually that measure, and we're back to what Pete said, so you've measured something, but how valid is it? And there was a great thread on Twitter the other day where people were saying, I've just seen this review, and the review was glowing. And then the score was 2 out of 5. And they were saying, what is it you wanted? Do you know what I mean? And so the beauty of data is sometimes it's embedded in qualitative data, where actually you're then having to sort of draw out almost what are people saying between the lines here, or sometimes what are they saying explicitly, and how does that relate to that quantitative data, and what does that tell us and allow us to do?
So
it's fascinating, Jonathan.
Absolutely fascinating.
But the trouble is, so when we start to talk about data, and I'll share, prior to this pod, I knew we were talking about data. I'm like, oh no, it's data. And I'm talking with two people that love data. And just in that very short kind of, we've only been, I don't know how long this pod's been running for yet, but some of the words that we're using, they're not accessible to people. So data, quantitative data was used there, Debbie. And then qualitative data. And I know we've had discussions about those terms, but it might be that someone's hearing those terms and going, what is Debbie talking about? And so it's going to be the outcomes and the context and the use of it and the help you to make decisions. Those things, yes. But then we sometimes get lost in models and syntax and terminology that isn't always accessible for someone who's trying to actually move things forward, I think. So I think maybe that's part of my mental block.
That's a really interesting point, about models, because actually, I mean, the whole premise behind a model is it's a simplification of reality. It's some representation that helps you get your head around something, helps you communicate ideas with people. And one of the things that I was actually teaching a data modeling overview course to a group yesterday, actually. And what we ended up doing is looking at a final model, which was fairly simple. I mean, certainly not a complete page of A4 even. And that told us as much about an organization as probably 100 process models would. I mean, that's probably a bit of an overstatement. But the thing is, a process tells you that little bit.
No, let's stop there. So Mr. Porter's value chain, you're saying that your data model told you more about the organization of the value chain than Harman's organizational model.
Yeah.
And I'll give you 5 or 10 value streams that tell you more about the organization because they'll include the customer. I'll put SIPOCs on. I'll give you 5 or 10 SIPOCs, and they'll tell me more about the organisation. Because one of the issues I think, Pete, is that the data models, some of the syntax makes the content inaccessible. So I've not yet met someone that can't read a SIPOC, and they haven't been able to understand where a value chain's coming from. So kind of.
I'll give you my example, though, guys. Sorry, I've got to cut in here. I think data modeling notation is not complex.
No.
It just looks at it if you don't understand what the symbols mean, but there's very few symbols. And I remember a few years ago talking to somebody who was not an information systems person, okay? He was a marketing person. And we were talking about his particular company. And the reason we were talking about it was he wanted to understand what requirements he might communicate to an analyst for his new part of the system that they were developing. And I said to him, well, let's have a look at different things in your organization. And we just literally put a box with the word customer in it. And we put another box with the word order in it. Okay. And we put another box with the word product. And then we started linking the boxes up. And he was just really straight away got it because it was his world. And as Pete said, we were modeling reality, but it was his reality. And so when we're putting the lines now between the boxes and I'm saying, well, okay, how many customers does an order come from? And he looks at me as if I'm mad and goes, 1, obviously. So we put a 1 down. And then we started building this model. And then at one point I put a line and I said, oh, so that should be 1 to 10 or something there. And he said, no, you've got that wrong. You don't understand our business in enough detail. Let me show you what those numbers should be. My job was done. At that moment, I thought, this is not, this is now somebody who really understands how the data needs to look, and you can capture so much on that one page.
And just to add to that, another example from Assist history, actually, this goes back many years, I have to say, even to our beloved founder, Mr. Steve Skidmore. Mr. Steve Skidmore and I were on a client site. It was a large Japanese trading company based not a million miles away from the Old Bailey in London. And one of the senior Japanese managers, who spoke reasonably good English, we started to explain to him what this diagram did. And he was absolutely sold, to the point that he went away and drew his own version of it. Without any prompting. He basically produced a data model, and he was a business person. He wasn't a business analyst. He wasn't a developer. He wasn't a database, but he was a business person. And he came back and we said, brilliant. We now know much more about your organization, because that model covered the key things that were important to that organization and the rules that govern some of those processes and things that you like so much.
I do see the value of data. I just can't get excited to the extent that you guys can, because I want to see the holistic picture, and I see it's one element, and that I don't get it. The excitement about this one element that some people have. Obviously, I've not got that excitement for some reason, and it's kind of the people aspect. What is it that's going on in that? And I'm sure you should use data to analyze the people aspect or the organization aspect, but it's really difficult to measure some of these things, and you can only really make sense of some of them when you look at them in the whole to make judgments, maybe, which is kind of what you then do with the data to help you make decisions, maybe.
Can I ask you a question, Jonathan? If you wanted to book a restaurant or a holiday or a hotel, would you want to know what process they follow, or would you want to know some data about what people think about it and the level of quality?
So if I'm booking a hotel, I want the outcome of the hotel.
That's a brilliant question, I have to say, though.
I want the outcome of the hotel room, but I need the process to work with the people of the organisation and their tech to all fit together. Because if they book me into a room where someone's already in there, for example, that something's gone wrong in the process and in their data. But it's
post-booking to make that decision. I don't think you go online and go, can you tell me about your process? You go online to go, okay, what's the ratings look like?
Maybe, but I want the outcome, Debbie. Because I don't want to just focus on, because if I look at the rating, let's say it's got a 5 out of 5 rating, because that's what the data's telling me, and then I turn up and it's dirty or it's occupied.
Absolutely.
Or not available, and there'd be all sorts of issues there. But we can't just think about the data. We've got to think about the data and the process with everything else.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, because you don't. But for some things, the data is absolutely invaluable. And it just helps decision making so much. And in all aspects of life, it helps you make decisions. And if you understand, some of the key concepts, like, understanding what an average means, and understanding a range of values, and understanding something called an outlier, which is an exceptional value piece of data that maybe is one you don't need to take into account because it's so out there. Understanding those types of concepts help you make decisions in your personal life, like booking a hotel or a restaurant or something, and it helps you make decisions in business. But you're absolutely right. Quite often, and it's like back to TripAdvisor, if I look at it and it says 5-star restaurant, okay, or 2-star, I do always go look at the comments, which is the qualitative data, to see what it means, because sometimes you'll get a sort of a 2-star, and the comment will be, the train was late getting me there. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And you think, well, that's nothing to do with the actual restaurant or hotel. So you do have to have all of these different elements, really, but the data really helps you make decisions.
Can we talk about dark arts a little bit, maybe? So I can use data to get insight on customers and possible future trends.
Yeah.
I think there's ethics in terms of our exploration of data, the probabilities of a customer doing something or not doing something because we've harvested data on maybe their payments or we've linked that to some other kind of records. Do you think we need to be careful with this? Because it's very powerful, but do we think the ethics, do we need to be concerned? What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, there are many examples where people can see their data in the public domain that's been misconstrued, misinterpreted, and presented in a certain way. And I have to say this, but it's slightly embarrassing, but I was watching Married at First Sight Australia the other day, and there was a real personality clash between two of the brides, the contestants, the participants. I don't know what you call them.
Explain this show to us, Pete.
It is an interesting concept, but more than that, it makes incredibly good telly because people start to really hate each other and really get at each other, and you can really see human nature in its rawest form. But putting that aside, there were these two participants that clearly had a really bad personality clash, and they had a big bust up at one point. And then one of them went away to Google some dirt that they could then share about the other one. And they found a photo that was slightly compromising, shall we say. And they then sent that round to the other participants. And, their argument was, well, what's wrong with that? It's in the public domain. She posted it on her whatever site. So it's out there. But actually, is it ethical for someone else to then pick that up and send that on to other people with malicious intent? So, this is where the ethics come in, isn't it? The mechanics of that is, well, it happens every day. People share things, don't they, amongst each other every day. But is it ethical to do that is another question, I think.
Yeah, it's quite a broad subject, and it's a really, really important subject because actually, there are regulations around data to a certain extent, and obviously there's a lot of movement at the moment to look at even extending that because of abuse of data, and it is dreadful. So you do have to really understand there is a lot of ethics around it, and unfortunately, because people will abuse data, it has to be extended. And one of the things that I think is I really love working with data, but it has to be done in an ethical way. And there's another side to ethics in data as well, which is data is sometimes used to make an argument that is a false argument. Yes. And that's an ethical use of data as well.
I don't know, I presume you guys have heard it, the quote sticks in my head. There's always damn lies and statistics. There's always a way to skew the data and to present it in a way, be not unethical, but you're just looking at it with a different light. And lots of people don't take a fully rounded view of the data, but there's a lot of power in terms of the data that we hand across to organizations, social media companies, the banks, for example. They hold a lot of data. Retailers, if we've signed up to loyalty cards, for example, can find out a lot about us. And it's kind of the power of data analytics and data science in terms of, well, there's lots of things that organizations could choose to do, but is it ethical for the organization to use that data and to gain the insight to how it's kind of intrude into your personal universe? I mean,
absolutely.
But a lot of that is regulated. I mean, there are, legal restrictions on a lot. And in all fairness, a lot of organizations use the data in an informed way, which is helpful to you as a customer. But I think this sort of brings it back to, and I'm going to say puppet model again here, because, if data is at the heart of a lot of things, and I see it at the heart of a lot of things, it is within that puppet model, there's organizational compliance and legal regulations and policies there's people, and what they feel about data and how they might give permission or not give permission for certain aspects. There's the processes that use it, and there's the technology that enables that usage. So while it is at the heart, it does then also benefit from that holistic view.
Brilliant. Right. Pete, any final thoughts on data that you wanted to share?
I do sort of have a final thought, because as I was sort of listening to you guys talking, I suddenly thought, well, not necessarily from an ethical point of view, but I think, the dangers of not properly understanding data. I think we probably sort of skimmed it a little bit, but, you could argue that no data is not as bad as bad data, if you see what I mean. Having misinformation, having information that's out of date is so much more dangerous than not having any data at all and then trying to run a business with no data. Although I put it to anyone that it's very difficult these days to run a business without any data.
Yes.
So this is where, of course, the BA comes in as someone that can try and help the business understand what data they need and where does it come from? Does it come from a trusted source? People often talk about the veracity of data. How accurate is it? How valid is it? How much can you trust that data? And this becomes a really key part of business analysis that I think a lot of business analysts think, no, that's someone else looks after that. I don't need to worry about that. But I would say this is pretty key to business.
Yep. Wow. I'm very passionate thoughts there, Pete, impassioned argument for data. Debbie, any final thoughts?
I'm not sure I can add anything to what Pete said, actually, because I really genuinely do think that we all need to understand data, because if we don't, we're just making assumptions, and it's like driving without a rear view mirror, to be honest, whether in business or in personal life.
Yeah, a few crashes behind you, but you've not noticed because you haven't looked at the data. Yeah, you're sort of starting to convince me. I just can't get as excited as both of you. But
can I just give you one final example? I know I've already had my last turn. But just one final example. It's from a very good book that I highly recommend, that I know Debbie has read and probably Jonathan as well, actually. Black Box Thinking.
It's a brilliant book. Brilliant.
By Matthew Syed. And he talks about a program to try and stop young people from offending in prisons. And apparently this was seen as a huge success. And it was based quite a lot on anecdotal evidence and narratives and things like that. And somebody at one point, I don't know all of the history to it, but at one point somebody actually said, well, is this actually having the desired effect? We've got people saying, yes, they don't no longer want to offend, people that have been sort of reformed characters that were probably a bit bad when they were juveniles. There's lots of anecdotal evidence, but is there actually a connection between this program and lack of offenders? And what actually happened when somebody said, right, let's measure this scientifically? They actually found that the people that had gone on it were more likely to offend and end up back in prison than the people that hadn't gone on it. And that tells you all you need to know about the power of data.
Yeah, good point, Pete.
Good sales pitch, Pete. I like it. Right. Thank you for taking part, both of you, and for not ganging up on me too much for presenting a slightly alternative view. I also want to thank everyone for listening and watching. If anyone's got any ideas for future episodes for the BA Brew, please do contact us. Our email address is babrew@AssistKD.com. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
But yeah, producer Tom here. That brings us to the end of season 4. What a journey it's been. We'd like to thank each and every single one of our guests that has joined us this season on the Brew. It was brilliant meeting each and every one of you. We'd also like to thank every single one of our listeners, as without you, BA Brew wouldn't be possible. To watch the Brew grow to something listened to worldwide has been brilliant, and it warms our hearts knowing that we can help people learn about business analysis from the borders of the Amazon rainforest in Brazil and the rest of our South American listeners, through the Caribbean and North America, Africa, Asia, the continents of Australia and Europe. And BA Brew will be taking a short break, but we will be back on August 26th, and we look forward to everyone joining us again. Thank you.